Nate, the strangest thing happened. We were talking about this episode that we're going to do today, and then literally earlier this week, 2 days ago, I had a coaching client of mine, literally ask me this question. The question we're going to answer today. And I thought, man, I wish we'd already recorded it so I could send to him. But it arose from a question that I had asked you based on another client asking me kind of the same question, which was, what is the optimal hiring order for a school that is scaling up through the various stages that a school scales up through? And I thought, man, there's very few people on the planet I want to ask this question more than you. And I'm sure you have a very interesting answer for us.
Well, first of all, I'm honored that you'd consider asking me, Daniel. And you know that I love talking through this kind of thing because it's a very 30,000 foot in one way, because it's like getting a perspective if you're a listener and let's say you're like 3 years into your developing your school and you want to imagine what it can look like 10, 15 years from now. This could be super useful, right? But in another way, it's very like boots on the ground, 1,000-foot view, because the truth is that as founders of a growing school, we're kind of always hiring, or we're always thinking about the next most important hire. And so I love people. I love bringing on great people. I love working with people, and I love the idea of building teams. So yeah, this is right in my wheelhouse. So I'm going to say something here, which is that this is the order of events that we did it, that my partner and I did it at the factory, right? And you brought this up when we were prepping it. You were like, it's really important that our listeners know that there isn't just one right way to do this, but it can be super valuable to listen to our story and our order of hiring and how we scaled up to a 7-figure school and when we brought on different roles. But just know that, like, if your path is going to look a little bit different, I think that's totally normal for a company.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. And just a couple other kind of introductory thoughts I have here. One, this is kind of a sister episode to another episode we did, which was about the correct order of marketing. So like, in what order so if you were starting with a $0 budget, what should you do first in your marketing? If you had $100, $500, $1,000, $2,000, $10,000, what order would you do? And the reason I think it's a sister episode, because it's very, very practical. It's a look at not a concept, but rather something that you could actually go out and do. And so I think these two episodes together, I'm not even sure what the episode number is on that. I know we did it at least 50 episodes back. I will also say the second thing, and the other thing I wanted to say, was that we're kind of scratching the surface here. We're going to, quote unquote, make a case for why you would want to do it in this order. We will point out where the order was influenced by unique circumstances that Brooklyn Music Factory was facing at that time, so that it might not be the most optimal order for you or most schools. But what I will say is that this is, again, a peek into something that we're dealing with in a much deeper and more substantive way in the Founders Forum later this year. We're kind of kicking off our initial group or class or mastermind, whatever word you want to put on it, of school owners who are wanting to scale up, who want a peek behind the scenes, get access to systems that Brooklyn Music Factory has never shared with anyone before. And so consider this to be like somewhat of a teaser for that. And if you want more information about joining the Founders Forum, if you want to scale up, if you want to do it in a way where you're not pulling your hair out or constantly fighting fires, just go to growyourmusicstudio.com/forum. And we're releasing more information for this inaugural class. But if you're listening this years in the future, we will be running this, and you can still go to that link and get information there. It will likely be a different page at that time, but the page will still be there. I promise it, because I'm going to make sure that it is. So here's my question. Who do you hire first?
It's a simple question, but let's be clear. Most schools, if not all, start as a solopreneur business, right? You don't have anybody. You're a single teacher studio, and that's where most schools start. So let's establish that and say we're moving on from that. Okay, so number of teachers are 1, number of administrative staff 0. You probably have somewhere between 5 and 40 or 50 or 60 students, depending on how you're organizing it. And your sales numbers are probably gross revenue somewhere between, a $0 and $100,000 a year, somewhere in there, right? You're a single teacher solopreneur studio. I would say the first place that everyone starts is with hiring additional teachers. Essentially, we all know this, Daniel. It's like you start your studio, you sell out all your inventory pretty quickly because you're a badass, and then you have a waiting list. And eventually you're inspired by like a podcast like 7FMS and be like, hey, I wanna grow bigger. I want to be able to serve more families. So you bring on a couple of teachers. And this is exactly what happened at the factory. I had my own studio. I decided I wanted to have a run at running a school. And what did I do? I didn't hire correctly. And I'm sure we have an episode on this. Instead, I hired like 4 or 5 of my friends and assumed that they would be aces and we'd be good to go. But that was the stage number 2. So bringing on multiple teachers is the first stage of growth, I think.
And I think on its face, that's fairly obvious.
Yep.
I will just interject one thing in. I do know from the past that there are some teachers that they want to scale up in students. They might do it, with group lessons or something like that, but they never intend to have either any teachers or a lot of teachers. And so one of the pieces of advice I give them is to maybe hire an admin to handle like little things around the studio, posting things to your social media, things of that nature. I know that's a little bit farther down your list, but I thought I would just mention that there because this list, if you don't intend to scale up, to a giant 7-figure school, or you don't ever intend on having like 20, 30 teachers, multiple programs, this episode will still be valuable to you in that
yep.
Some of these positions you would hire on. I know a single teacher studio that has 160 students right now, but they're doing big group lessons. Check out grouplessons.com, by the way. If you want to learn the best way to do group lessons, check out grouplessons.com. Point is that some people do bring in just like an admin support person, and they might only have 5 to 10 hours a week worth of work to do. That's what I did. But I thought I would at least mention that if you're not wanting to go the traditional teacher route, private lessons, like that sort of thing.
Well, and I mean, honestly, it's a perfect segue into the next stage of growth, I think, because you can apply this absolutely to the group lesson style program that doesn't have multiple teachers. Maybe it's a teacher plus a teaching assistant or something like that. But before I go to that next stage, let me just put an episode from way back in the day, episode number 5. Go back, bookmark that sucker, because it's 3 hiring mistakes that music school owners make. And I think that's where I talk at length about hiring a bunch of friends in the first year. And of course, they weren't all mishires, but there's some wisdom in there that I'd love for you all to pick up, and I'd love for you not to make the same mistakes that Nate made or Pira made along the way. So the next stage of growth is what I kind of call systemizing and scaling. Sort of that's the next. You're a new employer is when you bring on, say, 1 to 4 new teachers, and your main hurdle around being a new employer is just actually the hiring, training, and retaining of great teachers, right? And you can see your sales grow to maybe you're at the 150 to 250,000 gross. The number of students is going to be more like 100 plus to 200, depending on how many teachers you bring on. And really what you're working on at that stage of growth is just learning how to hire, literally, like how to have a successful hiring funnel, then what to do once you find that great guitar teacher or piano teacher that you want to bring on. That's the training piece. And then how to actually retain them, right? How to make sure that they have a path forward over 3 to 5 years where they can earn what they need to. They feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, all those kinds of things. So, Daniel, let me pause. Any thoughts on that new employer measurement that I shared before I get to systemizing and scaling? And I'll talk about my next most important hires that we made at the factory.
Nothing huge jumps to mind. I think that the 3 hiring mistakes episode was a very good call on your part, just because I do come in a lot as a cleanup guy for people who made all those mistakes. And, like literally even this year, people who they didn't know what to pay the teachers, so they just picked a number that they thought sounded good to them, and now they're in a massive problem because they didn't leave enough room for margin to actually run the school. They're making less money now than they did when they were alone. That was the dream. That wasn't what they got into this for. That's a big one. Bringing people in and not having solid policies, not having gotten legal advice, or not really knowing what the hiring laws were for their state. Just so many details where people are like, oh, I'm going to scale up, so let's go, and then I'm all for moving quickly and that sort of thing. But, there are some things that need to be done prior to all of that. So I would just say that, yes, scale up, do it in such a way where you're not shooting yourself in the foot for the next 5 years,
Yeah. Well, hold on, dude. I'd push back on one of the comments you made, which is you're a deep analytical dude. So you say I'm all for moving fast. The truth is that I think you're great at assessing an opportunity and knowing whether it's actually going to serve your company's needs or whether you need to do more research, et cetera. So I just want to hold there because I literally made that mistake. I literally paid all of my friends far more than what the school could afford. And so, as you know, like I'm a huge proponent of developing your financial fluency, but that wasn't like something that I always had. It was something that grew out of a need to develop, right? I made that mistake. Right. Don't make the same mistake Nate made. That's basically our mantra here. Like, learn from this episode.
Yeah. So I don't even perceive that as pushback. I think we're both in agreement here. I would just say that one of the joys I get out of this job is that I made a bunch of mistakes in doing things in what I did. And the early part of Grow in my career, this second career, was like helping people avoid that. Now I've worked with so many people that I'm seeing common mistakes that happen all across our industry. And I just literally, it's like I've gotten to the point where I can begin to predict what people are going to tell me they're doing in their school based on the problems they say that they're experiencing. Like, it's just, that's the point I've gotten to. And so it's almost like a little bit of the repetition we have in like working with kids and teaching them music. Like, we see the same 5 problems all the time. I see kind of the same thing. Point being, what I'm saying is that the joy I get now is just helping people avoid that before they scale up. So instead of coming in as the cleanup guy 3 years after they made all the mistakes, I love it when people reach out to me and be like, hey, I'm getting ready to go into the next stage of my career and I really want help doing that the right way. Oh, I love that so much. Reach out to me if that's where you're at, because we'll just avoid all these mistakes together. It's so helpful. Or again, Founders Forum. Founders Forum, you want to be a 7-figure school, growyourmusicstudio.com/forum. Avoid these mistakes and do it with Nate and me for a year.
Yeah, let's all avoid the mistakes together. Hence the forum piece. Like, we're all working together on this. Okay, so I'm going to move to my next stage of hiring, which is what I call systemizing and scaling. So let's get really specific. I was doing a little bit of digging here in prep of the episode, and I found a slide deck presentation, I think from 2016, that I made for the staff and team at BMF that was all about org charts. And it was about developing your organization. And one of the key principles that I learned through my training that I have applied to BMF is that you're not hiring people, you're hiring roles and responsibilities. And what your job is to do, your job is to go out and find the best possible people for your next most important role and responsibility. Let me say that again. As a CEO or a founder of a scaling company, or music school, what we're doing is we're developing team, but we're developing the right team at the right time, meaning we're saying, what role do I need now to help me get to the next stage of growth in my business? So when I talk about systemizing and scaling, what I really mean is that you're at that point where you're creating a whole bunch of systems to operate both the facility, the in-classroom experience, i.e. the curriculum, the payroll process, the money management, the marketing and sales systems. So you're at the point where you're like, okay, I'm ready to actually document systems. I've been testing these things for a few years, and I know that I'm ready to start delegating to someone else a number of roles. And I promise you, Daniel, we have a pile of listeners that are at that stage right now. They may not have been willing to take the leap yet of starting to delegate a lot of these things, but they're there. They can feel it. And Daniel, I think the way we knew at Brooklyn Music Factory that it was time to get to that next stage and bring on more support and delegate more was that my partner Pira and I, we were just underwater all the time. Like, we knew what we wanted. We'd been doing it long enough, but we felt overwhelmed by every workday, the tasks. We were going 6 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week working. But we knew what we were building. We were very clear on purpose. We were very clear on the values. We were very clear on our products, what we wanted to offer, etc. But we were frankly just like actually probably still afraid to delegate. We were kind of micromanaging. We were holding on. We were gripping onto everything. You know what I mean? Like, do you remember that in your studio of when you still gripped onto things and then you were like, wait, I don't need to hold on to billing anymore. Like, money's not a scary thing. I know how to do this. I can train someone else. Or that's one example. But you remember that in your own journey?
That's come up several times. And sometimes it isn't fear of letting go. Sometimes it's just not even, and I'm going to define this. It's not even knowing how to let go. Sometimes it's how would I give this to other people? Or I don't have a full-time job here to give to someone. There's only,
yes.
I've literally had, I thought these thoughts, and I've literally had people again this year say the same thing. Like, why would anyone want such like a micro time job? It's not even part-time, it's micro time. And I said, there's so many people that would want that job. That's what, like, they literally just, literally one of the hires I made this summer, I'm saying literally a lot, I don't know why, but one of the hires I made this summer, they only needed 5 to 10 hours a week. And they want to scale it up, but not now. And so this puts me in a fantastic position because I would want to scale them up later, but I don't have enough work to give them where I could give them a 20-hour-a-week job. So
right.
If there's something you need, there's probably someone out there that's on the other end of that was like, man, I really wish that you know what, it could be. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. There's a website called hiremymom.com. And it is ex-corporate professionals who decided to leave the work world, and they're stay-at-home moms now, and they're just looking for some part-time remote work. I've hired people from this website before, and they're not looking for a massive job. They have skills that they used to use in a corporate environment, and now they're wanting to deploy them in a way that honors the lifestyle that they want. So there could be people out there that they're just begging for a 10-hour-a-week job. And here you are thinking, man, no one would want to work for 10 hours a week. That's not how jobs work. You got to think bigger. And look, I'm pointing at myself because that was what I was doing. I was like, man, I'm never going to be able to delegate because I'm not going to be able to find someone that wants to work as little as I need right now. And then what ended up happening was I did find someone who was willing to do that. And then she and I grew together to the point that we went from micro time to full time. I've done that 3 times now in the last 6 years. And 2 of those people ended up becoming my right hand, Kirsten and then Bethany.
I'll give you a simple exercise. Do your not to-do list. Just take like 10 minutes, set a timer, write down all the things you wish you weren't doing. We call it the not to-do list. I rewrite it for myself every year. And then I take a look at it last year and I'm like, which of that not to-do list did I let go of some things? Did I delegate some things? Then once you have your not to do list, don't be overwhelmed by it because it'll be long and you'll be like, there's no way I'll ever let all this stuff go. You're not supposed to let everything go at once. You take your like top 5 things. Sorry, no, don't go to the top 5 yet. Next step is to look at your not to do list and ask yourself, have you built some kind of working procedure on how to do that? If not, could you create a system or working procedure that somebody else could follow to get it done? Okay. And then the third step in the exercise is give yourself the top 3 or 5 on that list and be like committed that you are going to, your next most important hire in administrative support to help you start scaling and systemizing your school will be taking on these 5 responsibilities from your not to do list. Dig it? Now, I'm going to ping you another episode because Daniel is the master. I hope you don't mind me saying this, master of working procedures. And we have episode number 46 where you go into detail on how you created your system and exactly what it looks like. There might even be in the show notes like a template or something to one of your working procedures that you use. Anyways, episode 46, if you're like, I got no idea even what you're talking about, Nate, Daniel, around writing a system and what to do, just bookmark that sucker and go listen to it.
Yeah. The sister episode to 46 is 48. We recorded those on the same day, and it was 2 different looks of how to run a system-based business. And we did it in your studio in Brooklyn a year and a half ago.
Nice.
46 and 48 were the ones that the first time we were live and in person for an episode.
Yeah, then definitely. That's like bonus. You get to look into my basement studio in Brooklyn.
It was a fun episode. Fun episodes to do. Yeah. So Nate, it's interesting because the stated topic of this episode is like what people do you hire? We've only talked about one so far, and now we're getting into the world of systems, which is important. So I'm not saying that we're doing a bad job here, but I'm curious where are we going next with this?
I want to give you concrete hires that we made at BMF that were part of the systemizing and scaling stage of our growth.
Love this.
Okay. So again, none of these positions were full-time. They were roles. Okay. So one of them was a marketing manager, right? So we brought on a vocal teacher, brought her on. She had a little bit of experience in her previous gig. She'd worked at Warby Parker for like 4 years doing project management and like a little bit of marketing and things, but probably not. I just trusted her with learning our marketing methods. And so we brought on a marketing manager. What did she do? Roles and responsibility, updating websites, creating email copy in tandem with me, social media. She managed the social media accounts. So that was one role. Another role we brought on were directors. So as we were growing, we brought on a private lesson director. I was in that role, so I replaced myself as private lesson director. I replaced myself as advanced band director. We brought on another teacher to take on that director role. And so what that director is doing is they're now sort of acting as, in the traditional structure, kind of like middle management. They're the ones that are responsible for the well-being of the teachers, producing the gigs, making sure that the teachers, when they have issues with families, because all teachers have issues with families at some point, instead of them coming directly to Nate, they were coming to the director, right?
Yeah.
So one other position that we brought on right out of the gate, and again, part-time, was we brought on, honestly, like a systemizer. We called him Director of Repeatability at the time. And basically, I think Kai did it, was in the first position. It was very part-time. He basically worked with me on a whole bunch of things that I was doing and helped me document them all. And then helped train, either he took over some of the tasks on my not to-do list, or he helped train somebody else to take on a couple of tasks. So that was literally like a documenter. It was like someone who was just like, I'm going to organize the G Drive with systems like, here's how to schedule a student step by step. Here's how to do X. Here's how to do Y, right? The last role that we hired, again, part-time, was we called a director of administration. And what were they doing? they were primarily just managing the studio, the facility. They were showing up and working at the desk, from 3 to 7. They were doing all those roles. I know we have some good episodes on how to hire a manager for your school, but that was our first iteration of it. It wasn't a 40-hour-a-week gig. It was more like a 20-hour-a-week gig. What did they do? They worked at the desk, and they became really good at all the frequently asked questions from parents.
Mm.
So those are some specific roles right out of the gate that we started with.
Nate, so that's good. And I like thinking about this through the lens of where someone would hire someone within the stages of growth. You're at the beginning, middle, hopefully not the end. But
right.
But just as you get bigger, as you scale up, I think it would be helpful. I know we just talked about all those. I think it would be helpful now because you gave really good job descriptions, what they did for you, how you handed it off, how useful it was in relation to delegation and building systems in the school. Now, just to be helpful for everyone listening or watching, if they're on YouTube, let's just go through and make just a very quick checklist of all those positions you just talked about, but kind of in the exact order that you hired them, now that people know what those roles were. Because if we started in that way, you might have said, family experience facilitator, and they would have had no idea what that was. So I'm glad that you contextualized what these roles were. But now let's just give people like the checklist. Does that sound cool?
Yep. Yeah, totally.
Nice.
So, and I think this is like a pencil and paper moment. If you're listening, just be like, hold on, pull the car over, write this sucker down on your phone. So this is the order in which we hired over the first, let me just say 6 to 8 years of the company of Brooklyn Music Factory. So first order of business, hiring teachers.
Yeah.
Second thing we did, and this was unique to BMF, but Pira, my partner, joined the company within the first year.
Yeah, you merged two schools, really.
We really merged two schools, and she essentially had a band program, like a rock band program. I was already doing that, but I knew early on that I wanted to bring on somebody else who was an expert, who had vision, that I could grow this company with. So she came on. That was the expansion number 2 was bringing on that partner. Right. And it was really about handling a portion of the business that I wanted to hand off. So she became the band director, and then growing a camp, which became a really important part, as we've talked many times, in the growth of our school. Number 3, money person. I brought on a bookkeeper. It was a mom who had a child at the school, and at BMF, she came on and started reconciling the books, and also kind of like a part-time CFO. Like I could ask her all my dumb money questions, and she had no problem answering them. So
was
number
she
3,
an actual
money
accountant?
person.
Was she like trained as an accountant? I love that.
I don't even think she was trained as an accountant, dude. I think she was just doing the books at another pre-K.
I see.
So she was doing the books at a school around the corner. So again, back to your earlier point in the comment, in the app rather, you made a comment around like, don't overthink the hire. Just hire for the role you need, because there's absolutely someone who's willing to work like 2 hours a week on it.
I talk to so many school owners with margin problems, and they have no income statement. They have no P&L. Like we've done entire episodes on this, but seriously, we have bookkeeping for multiple companies right now, and it costs me like $200 a month. And I will tell you, there are inflection points in my business before I made X decision and then after I made X decision. And one of those huge inflection points for me was just doing a monthly P&L/income statement. Like the quality of my decision making went up so much after that. That is such a good way to invest your money early on, because you're dealing with the truth about the blood in your business, which is cash. So I'll shut up. Keep going.
Okay. I gotta say this. 4 months into the forum, in January and February, we dedicate 2 whole months, right, on financial fluency. You don't have to be a super nerd. You just have to be super organized, right? You don't have to go super deep on numbers, but you got to be organized like you're talking about. So anyways, another little pitch for the forum. If you're interested, make sure to check that out, because we're going to spend 2 whole months on getting you organized. Okay. So number 3 was money person, bookkeeper, right? Number 4 was that I said I referenced sort of the desk person whose sole job was to make sure they could answer questions that parents had. We called that role the family experience facilitator. Basically, that's admin support with a focus on customer success. That's what the family experience facilitator did. He literally had FAQs and email templates for any question. We need to buy a digital piano. No problem. I'll send you an email on the best piano to buy. Hey, when's the gig? No problem. I'll send you the email with the schedule of the gig. That's what the family experience facilitator did. That was hire number 4. Hire number 5 was that director of repeatability, right? The operations person. Again, all about helping us get organized with writing systems. They took on some systems. He's the first person who ever did like a inventory of all the gear at the school. He's the person who helped us figure out how to start repairing gear, how to do it in a repeatable fashion. He's the person who made the working procedure for setting up and tearing down the stage for every gig. So that was that 5th hire. The 6th hire was that marketing manager I talked about, helped with the web, helped with email marketing, started understanding how to use our CRM and our automation system. The 7th hire was a salesperson. So up until that point, my partner, Pira, and myself had been doing all of the sales, right? And for good reason. We were freaking good at it. Like, Daniel, you and I have done some really good sales episodes, but you're probably, like, if you're listening, you're probably closing 50 to 90% of all leads because nobody's more passionate about the purpose and the promise of your school than you are as an owner, right? So, but there comes a time when you need to replace yourself. I do not take a single sales call at this stage of the company. I absolutely help the sales team. We have 3 people on sales now, but I don't do any sales calls. Nope. Not for Brooklyn Music Factory. So we got up to number 7, salesperson. And then we got up to number 8, which is hiring director. So that's when Ben replaced me as private lesson director. That's when Pira was eventually replaced as band director as she started really developing the camp, and we committed to growing that program. She couldn't grow band and camp at the same rate if she was directing both, so we needed to bring in a band director. In addition, we brought on a curriculum director because that's when Brooklyn Music Factory started really developing big music games, developing its mini keys and Jam Band 101 program. And so we needed someone who was actually going to project manage and direct the team of people that were doing that. Yep. So that brings me to our next most important hire, but I'm going to pause there for a second. Any thoughts, Daniel, before we go on to where we went next with our hires?
Just one.
Yo, what do you got?
For those listening, if you're already at the end of this list, there's wisdom to pick up here. But if you're near the beginning, as many are, and you're thinking, oh, I have to get all my ducks in a row. There's so much chaos around here, fires all the time. And you're thinking, I've got to solve that. Actually, the hire is probably the person you need to solve that. The reason why there's so much chaos is that you're trying to do the job of like 8 different people.
Yes.
The whole purpose of this episode is to give you a real life practical example of how Nate added people, in what order he added them, so that he could let go of areas and it be done better than and with more attention to detail than he could do because he was managing all these areas. That's the whole purpose of this episode.
Exactly.
So the one system or thing that you do actually have to do before you enlist other people to solve these problems for you is you've got to have a hiring and training system. That's the next action. If you're wanting to scale or you're wanting you're wanting to eliminate some of these areas of focus for you, the one thing you have to do well is know how to hire the people who can solve these problems for you. And I guess I would say you as the CEO, and this is well documented by a lot of business strategists or coaches, really, you as a CEO, you've got to deliver good marketing and sales so you actually have the funds to hire these people, and then you scale in fits and starts as you do that. So I would just say marketing and sales, and knowing how to hire team. Like, that's how you scale up. Those are the two things you absolutely have to solve. But if you're like, oh, I can't hire someone for this area, I don't have any systems built, you're thinking about this wrong. They come and build the systems for you. You train them how to build systems in a way that is coherent for your company, in a way that you think, in a way that will work for the people that you want to hire, right? But you don't write the manual for them. I talk about this in episode 46 and 48, the ones you referenced earlier. I cannot tell you the number of people that come and do consults with me, and they think, oh, I've got to write out all the systems in the school first. I'm like, no, that would be such a bad move. You want to enlist the talent and creativity of other people. Literally, one of the people I hired this summer for Piano Express, for grouplessons.com, was a brand new role, a role that in the history of me ever hiring people or employing people, I've never had a role like this before. And I straight up told him when he came in, I don't have a lot of good answers for this. I have a lot of vision for what I want the outcome of this role to be, but you and I are going to build this together. You're going to be making up part of this job as you go along. And I'm just letting you know that now. And sure enough, he's bringing in all kinds of ideas that I wouldn't have had, because the reason I hired him was because I can't do the job he's going to do.
Yes. And let me swap out people and him for role. Just every time that Daniel said, you're in charge of hiring people, just change your language to, you're in charge of knowing what the next most important role you need in your company is to get you to where you want to get. And then you're in charge of trying to hire the best possible people into the role, but you're hiring for a role.
Yes.
And like the family experience facilitator, Daniel, like the hire you were referencing, which I think was your customer success position you were talking about. We didn't have any idea, just like you. All I knew is that we were getting flooded with questions, and the same questions over and over. And we needed someone who could manage this in a way better way than I could. So the family experience facilitator, it's okay for you to bring on the role. Like in that case, I just knew that we needed someone to help families in their journey through BMF, right? So we made up a fancy name for it, the FEEF, Family Experience Facilitator. And all I did was say, up until this point, Brett, because that was the name of the person who got hired into the role, here's how we've been doing it. That was it. Here's how we have been doing it. We hope that it radically improves from how we have been doing it, because we need somebody else to take this over and level it up. So I love that addition. I think if I were to say to our listeners at this juncture, because I'm only going to give a couple more hires and that's it for this app, but there are all these sort of corporate terms, right? Like there's an org chart. What's an org chart show? It shows a bunch of roles, and it usually shows it in some kind of hierarchical way. And the reality is most music school owners are like, they want to be the antithesis of some large corporate structure. So they're like, I'm not writing an org chart. Plus, I don't want to be in a hierarchical model and all this. And so they missed the whole point of the episode. And you just did a really good job, Daniel, of being like, hold on. The point of this episode is that you understand that hiring is something that you must do in building team as a CEO. So you can be anywhere on the Brooklyn Music Factory list of hiring, right? But the takeaway is, know that this is one of your important roles as a founder, right? So the takeaway of here learning about org charts is, oh, I need to organize the roles. I need to stop thinking about all the people and start thinking about the essential roles that allow this school to grow and to be sustainable. And then I need to draw them in a way that people have been doing for a long time, rather than trying to make up a new version for myself. Okay. The second thing I'm going to say about this is that once you draw your picture of your school and all the different roles, then what you're going to do, as was taught to me, this isn't something I'm making up. This isn't something I knew how to do back in 2015. This was something that I was trained on. This is why Daniel and I are so energized around the idea of a forum, because we want to get a whole bunch of people together that can share their wisdom, and then also are egoless in their ventures. They're willing to be like, hey, I have no idea how to do this yet. I don't know how to draw an org chart. Can we just all do this together? Yeah, we can, because I found it to be incredibly useful. I just redrew my org chart this last year. So I'm coming out of a time of reorganizing our company, right? But the last thing I'll say is, once you draw your org chart and you can put these hires that I just listed on there, right? You can put all these different roles. What you want to do is draw the name in all of those roles who's currently responsible. And this gets back to Daniel's. The reason why you can't do it well is because you're wearing so many hats. At BMF, we called it seats on the bus. That was, instead of wearing too many hats, we said you're sitting in too many seats, right? Like, you can't sit in 8 different seats on the bus. Sure. And so we went through this whole thing over the years of like 2016 and 17, sort of years 5, 6, and 7 of the company. And we just kept asking ourselves as a team, like, okay, who's in what seat on the bus? And what is the total number of seats that anybody could ever sit in without their job sort of diminishing in quality, them failing, right? Like, you can't have your teacher also be responsible for billing, marketing, managing, sales, and systemizing. That's too many seats. They're going to fail, right? And you're going to wonder why now they're not retaining their students like they once did. You're going to wonder why your marketing seems to be slipping. You're going to be wondering why your conversions of leads is going down when you used to do it. Well, it's because you have them in too many roles. So that's the last piece of this exercise. I want to get to our final couple hires if I can.
Love
Daniel,
it.
so because I want to bring this sucker to a close for our listeners so that they can start taking action on this. What we did after that, and we've done some really good episodes on hiring general managers, after that was the time when we realized, wait a minute, we need to bring on someone who's actually managing people that aren't teachers. So teachers plus others. And so we brought on a position that we call Director of Families and Communication, which is our fancy title. We love titles at BMF, but really it's a general manager. And so that general manager, in this case, was my wife, Jessica. She left a corporate environment where she was working for a marketing agency. And she's like, time for, it was an inflection point in her life, time for a new career path. She came on and did this. So that person in the org chart reports to me as the CEO, right? That's a little weird because it's my wife, but it's all good. I got a lot of coaching on how to do that well.
That's good.
But which is important. But more importantly, what happened was she took on things like our people power. So she became the director of that weekly meeting around hiring. She became the person who was in charge of the employee manual. We've got a great episode coming up on that. She's the person who became in charge of managing any questions around just administrative, operational for all the teachers. So now people like our private lesson director role, Ben, wasn't responsible for answering a lot of the logistical questions that the teachers had. Instead, that went to that general manager. So that last hire was a huge one for us because that was a full-time position. That wasn't a part-time position. That was someone where we're like, it's time now to have someone who's like a really important centerpiece in the wheel of Brooklyn Music Factory, right? So now as CEO, I had, a general manager. I had 3 or 4 directors, all that I was responsible for, right? And so that changed the structure of our company. And what happened is that we got into a very real growth stage of the company at that point. That's when we really met and exceeded that $1 million mark in gross revenue and have been growing ever since, because it allowed me as a founder to go into a much more strategic role and be in an area where I could really support the directors and help with the make them feel much more empowered in their jobs. I could support a marketing director. I could support Jessica as a general manager. And that's like a profound shift in your company growth, right? Because instead of me being in a space of putting out lots of fires, I was in a space of growing people. And that's a key stage of growth for all of our listeners. If you want to scale to a 7-figure business, at some point you're going to move through all these different hirings that we've listed out, and then you're going to find yourself in a very different role and responsibility than when you started the school.
Yep. It is interesting because, and this is just how I think about it, but when you play a video game,
nice.
And I'm thinking the video games when I was a kid, Mario.
Like strategy games? What are we talking about?
No, like a Mario game.
Oh, dig it. Yeah, love it.
The game teaches you how to play the higher levels. The actual playing of the game prepares you to handle more difficult tasks. And as you're making this journey towards scaling up and you're becoming the kind of person that can develop people like that, you're going to keep running into the same problems over and over again until you solve them. And going from someone who primarily gives themselves a task list of things to do, like build a landing page or write an ad, teach the kids yourself, teach the adults yourself, you end up having to communicate those things to other people. You have to communicate expectations, policies, and procedures. You have to do it in such a way that it honors their expertise and their dignity. You have to do it in such a way where you are not falling into two different negative patterns, such as either being too harsh or being too lenient. That's a very dumbed down way of communicating a much more complex concept. But there's all these things that you have to do on the way there. But the joy is that you get to experience business in a way that most don't. And I would just say that, just speaking for myself, growing a couple companies now, it is interesting how I use my time on the average week, like this week right now versus 5 years ago. And it is possible to have a life where you're looking at your task list for the week and you're looking at your schedule you made for yourself for the week, if you do such a thing, which I think you have to when you get to this level.
Yep.
and you see large blocks of free time, and you see a lot of meetings with different people in the company, and you also see large blocks where you can just knock out some major projects that you need to take care of. You see blocks of time where there's planning time, and this is where you reflect on how the company is doing, and you're looking at your dashboards, and you're looking at the results of your marketing. You're looking at if you're running a academy or a school, you're looking at your retention numbers. You're looking at testimonials that have come in. You're looking at customer complaints that have come in. You're collating and analyzing and thinking about the things you're hearing from your private lesson director or your group lesson director, from your customer success person, from your sales team. And you're getting this picture of how the company's doing. And then because of the self-development you've done along the way, listening to podcasts like this, or listening to Alex Hormozi, or reading books like Scaling Up or Scale, or reading books like The Great CEO Within, which we did a whole podcast episode about on that book. You're turning into and developing into a person that just has great judgment. And then you're taking all this information because your mind is free from the day-to-day. And you're just thinking like, what's coming down the road? And guess what? Your brain, your intuition actually gives you things to think about, because you have the space and the clarity to take all these inputs and deal with them in a calm and rational way, because you've put out fires within the company, because you took the time to develop these people and build these systems so that these things are handled. And then you're just sitting back in the control center, not up in your ivory tower, but in the control center with people who love you, with people who you trust. And you're like, interesting, I see a problem coming. This system's going to break in a year because this part of the company is growing in this way. Or, ooh, we've got a problem over here. And I think the problem over here is actually related to this thing over in this other part of the business. And you see that now because you've developed that intuition. And that's how life has become for me. I used to be an operator. Back at the very beginning of Grow, I was doing everything. And
everybody starts that way,
yeah,
right?
Everybody starts
in
that way.
operations.
Yeah. And what you do is you end up building a job for yourself that you really like. So there are parts that I could have handed off to other people that I still do because I'm really good at it and I really love doing it. And then there's parts that Bethany just handles entirely for me, and I don't even think about this part of the business anymore. And then other people do, other things for me as well. And I don't know. I just would wish this on anyone because it's a very calm lifestyle. I get a lot of free time to do things that I like to do. I'm not working 60, 70 hours a week. This is a well-known fact. I say this on the podcast all the time, and I know for darn sure you're not, Nate. Yeah, this is what you get from a little bit of from a lot of discipline on the front end. I'm not gonna oversell it. And I would just say that, maybe my final comment here, because I know we're drawing to a close, but in almost every area where I worked on in the business, I look at how long it took me to get mastery there. I look at how long it took me to feel like I knew what I was doing. I look at how long it took me to go from having this idea for group lessons in 2005 and then finally feeling like I'd really mastered it in my own studio in 2012. Right. 7 years. And then I look at I look at the 600-700 studios that I've helped switch to group lessons and see how they're doing it in a matter of months. That's because I did all that work. And now I'm in a position where I can go to people and say, do this, and this in this order. And then you can avoid all these problems. You can avoid all this learning I had to do on my own. And I think as I describe the life that I have now, I'm not just saying this, but it was 10 years ago this year I hired my first coach. And I look at how much faster I grew the companies that I have after that point versus what it took me before. And I look at all the massive amounts of money I spent on education, and what that's meant for me is just getting to those results faster. And that's really at the heart of why we're doing the Founders Forum starting in this November. Yeah. Because in group lessons, in marketing, in scaling, in hiring, in all these areas where I've historically coached people, it's like I've seen my clients always do it faster than I ever did. And again, that's at the heart of what the forum is. And it's just we're doing this now at a level where there's so many more people involved. So it's not just Daniel anymore. Now it's Nate and Daniel and a team of people around us that are also going to be participating in this. So that's kind of how I would end this. And I hope I paint a picture of a lifestyle that is attainable for almost everyone who's listening or everyone who's listening. So there it is.
Daniel, that's my last hire on my list.
Ooh.
Was hiring consultants and really, really good coaches. And it sounds, I feel like sometimes it can be like, well, but Nate, now you coach. Daniel, now you coach. It sounds weird for you to say hire a coach. But I'm telling you, no, this is literally the path for Brooklyn Music Factory to grow. I really have vivid memory of handing a $10,000 check over for the first time and being like, whoa, this is so much money for us, as a percentage of our revenue to be doing this at the time. And I am not kidding, dude, when I tell you I have a text on my phone right now from this same coach that we used and program we used for leadership training, because I reached out to him and said, hey, I think I'm ready for some more training, not for me personally, but for some members of my team. I'm wondering what you're putting together this fall, because I might send some members of the team for some micro training. Same idea, Because why? Back to your point, it accelerates the opportunities that Brooklyn Music Factory has, right? By bringing in those outside, that outside influence, that outside support. And you say this all the time, and I appreciate it, which is that, like, it's not something we say you need to do. It's something we say we all do. Right? It's not, there isn't a finite timeline on the amount of help that you might need. It's the rest of your life, depending on where and how you want to grow. Right? So I love that you shared that, Daniel, because that was literally number 11 on my list. Like, who did we hire? Who was the last most important hire? Well, it was that. I was basically like, dude, it's time to start investing in all of us, and especially me, if I want Brooklyn Music Factory to get to where it needs to get to. And it wasn't just me. It was my partner and I. We both invested in it. We both traveled. We both learned.
And I would just say that I think both of us, you and me, Nate, we would say that if we could go back, if we had a time machine, we would move that last most important hire much closer to the beginning of the list. I know I would do anything to go back and not be so skeptical in my 20s, because here's the deal. The reason why people tend to balk at that is that they're like, oh, I can't afford to lose the money. You know what you actually can't afford to lose? You can't afford to lose the time. You can lose the money.
Yes.
I will happily exchange money for time. And maybe this is just a function of getting older and looking at the basically, I wouldn't say I wasted my 20s, but man, does it ever feel like that now. And some of the most satisfying clients I have, the very first client that I ever took on was 25 years old, and she was more successful every year of her life than I was at the same age, because she was smart enough. She's actually been interviewed on this podcast, Caitlin Davidson. She was smart enough to reach out to someone who'd done it, and I helped her grow so much faster than I ever did at her age. And earlier this month, I had a 19-year-old reach out to me. Like, what does it take? How smart is that person? Dude, if I could go back to 19 and accelerate the timeline, oh my word. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, but hold on, dude, because we did accelerate the timeline just in a different craft. Like, at 19, I was very actively pursuing like jazz piano teachers. Sure. And like, I was looking for the best. And of course I was like, man, I don't have $100 for a lesson, but I was spending it because I was in pursuit, Sure. And so, if you're interested in really accelerating your growth in the craft of business, then ask yourself, who's supporting you there.